Hi, everyone. In this video, I'm going to respond to a comment on my trauma repair made simple video on YouTube. And this comment is from Pedro M8831. And Pedro says, I've been trying to make sense of this work for many years now, trying to get into the body and uncover what's going on, but nothing ever changes. I've asked therapists how to tell the difference between restored frustration and a cycle of created frustration created by the mind. They can't tell me. My body is clenched and rock solid. It's completely stuck. I feel like there's a huge load of trapped energy that just won't release. It buzzes and rides, and if I sit with it, sometimes it feels like something is shifting, but it never changes. It's only gotten worse. I feel irritable and frustrated almost constantly. When I get into the body, there's never any shift. I'd like to feel emotions and some sense of internal movement, but nothing seems to work. I read Judith's book many times, but I just don't understand what I'm supposed to be looking out for. Is this stuckness just supposed to build and build until it finally releases? Okay, yeah, so it's, it sounds like a situation that's been in a holding pattern for quite a while there, Pedro. And, I appreciate you just sharing this publicly in a comment, and your varied attempts to get underneath it. So I'm going to speak in broad brushstrokes here, and I just want to make the disclaimer that this video is not meant to substitute any kind of transformational work that you or anybody would get from a qualified practitioner who knows what they're doing. So, all right. So let's just take things one by one here. Trying to get into the body and uncover what's going on, but nothing ever changes. When we are getting into the body, let's say, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, but one thing that I've seen people do that it's a mistake basically in terms of how to really get into the body, is that they will project their thinking mind into different areas in the body. And there's some notion that that's what they think they should be doing. When in reality, that is just kind of reinforcing the divided sense of self, or it's reinforcing our internal sense of fragmentation, and it's not bringing us any closer to unity. So projecting the thinking mind into the body would be like this. So here I am sitting in meditation, and when I get an instruction like inhabit your midsection, what I do is I kind of send my top level mental awareness as if it's a kind of probe down into my midsection, as if there's like a little camera there looking around. And what I've done is I've compartmentalized my top level conceptual awareness, and I've sent it down into my body. Okay. So that's not the way to do it. Or you can do it that way, but it'll just cause more fragmentation. Ultimately, what we want to do is relax or rest into. It's like we're resting that energy of the thinking mind into a field of life and being that's already there. Okay. So there's already a field, you could say, that pervades the body, of presence and emptiness. Or you could say that to put it in more palpable, tangible terms, there's life, right? There's life in our cells. There's life all over the internal space of the body. And so what we can do is just kind of tune into that sense of aliveness at the base level, where it's not, we can feel it as movements of energy, but it feels like a level of mind or consciousness, but it's deeper than the thinking mind. You can say that our thinking mind lives here, and then we have a feeling mind that is through the internal space of the body. Okay. And so when we just kind of like allow our, I guess you could say, attention, when we sort of relax our mental grip on our experience, that experience of life and being as one continuous feeling comes to the fore. We can feel sensation, emotion, and mental activity, including our thinking mind, really all as one unified thing. Certainly our thinking mind is sort of like the top level of that. We feel it in the front part of the brain, you could say. But we also feel the internal space of our body as one cohesive, unified whole. Okay, so so it's important to just note that in terms of what we're actually doing when we get into the body. We are not trying to project, this like camera that's made of the energies of the thinking mind all over the body. That's not what we're trying to do. It's more like there's already a kind of mind or consciousness that is at a deeper level of the feeling of the thinking mind. In fact, it's the deeper substrate of the thinking mind that already suffuses and pervades the body. And if we just relax our mental grip on our experience and we tune into our feeling level of being, it'll come to the fore, that experience of feeling the internal space of the body all at once. That will naturally tend to come to the fore. It does take a little bit of effort or focus to just, I guess you could say, to rest back into the internal space of the body, to relax our mental grip on our experience, to feel that our placement in our body is centered and sort of rested back and at ease. Those do require a little bit of volition, but not much. And then, the experience of continuity and integration is an effortless experience that arises. Okay, so I hope that those nuances are helpful in terms of getting into the internal space of the body. Second thing here, I've asked therapists how to tell the difference between stored frustration and a cycle of created frustration by the mind, and they can't tell me. Okay. So let me just read that again. I've asked therapists how to tell the difference between stored frustration and so I don't quite know what this means. So I'm going to take some liberties here a little bit. Stored frustration to me would mean frustration that is from earlier life experiences that is stored in the body that is unprocessed. And let's just make that distinction by talking about more primary experiences. For example, if our bids for getting attention from our parents were rebuffed on an ongoing basis, then that might create the sense of frustration. Maybe that sense of frustration is linked to a view of humans or to a view of reality that's broader than just our primary relationships with our parents. And that view of reality says, it's just impossible for me to get the affection that I need from another human being, or I'm unlovable, or something like that. And that's the frustration. Okay. Now, let's say that is something that we've in order to just hold our experience together, and in order to not be overwhelmed, we have kept that knowing out of conscious awareness, right? We've kept that low view of ourselves out of conscious awareness for most of our childhood and into our adult life. Okay, so if that is what we are talking about as stored frustration, and it is stored for the fact that it is out of conscious awareness, and part of us doesn't want to be aware of what it is. It's like we've still got the lid on our experience because, on a deeper level, it just doesn't feel safe enough to be aware of those emotions, right? And it's not fundamentally real that we're unlovable or anything like that, but deep down, it might still feel that way. And so it's important for part of the mind-body system to keep that out of conscious awareness. Okay, so let's say that is one category. What I believe you're talking about, Pedro, when you're talking about stored frustration. And you make a distinction between that and the cycle of created frustration created by the mind. Well, so if we're talking about a kind of more primary level of, childhood wounds or, issues that come from childhood that in our adult life we're unconscious of at some level, and then frustration created by the mind, that more top level frustration might be things like, oh my God, these body sensations just feel so bad. I don't know what to do with them. And I feel helpless about that. And I feel frustrated, right? And you could say that view of frustration is created by the mind because it's an interpretation of what's happening. It's in other words, the interpretation of, oh my God, I have all this suffering going on underneath the surface and I can't do anything about it. So I can't do anything about it is a construal of meaning that's not fundamentally true. So in that sense, it is created by the mind, but it's the mind's, it is still the mind's attempt at forming a coherent view of the situation, or a view that makes sense. The mind is just trying to make sense of the situation, and the way that the mind is making sense of the situation at a more top level is, oh my God, this is so frustrating. I can't seem to resolve these inner body sensations, right? You could say that all of it at some level is construed at a deeper level by the mind, by the whole mind-body system. But we can make a meaningful distinction still between a more base level of, trauma-based imprints, or, gut level early emotional learnings that feel objectively real, things that have totally shaped our life, and a more surface level of frustration that is about this sort of, amalgam of deeper frustrations. Okay, so I hope that answers the question about how to make distinctions about those things. One more distinction that I'll say about that is this, right? So we might, let's say we have feelings of low self-worth, okay? And those feelings of low self-worth are also stored or felt as constrictions in the body. They're related to energetic and somatic constrictions. And so if you invited someone, or if it's us, if we start to explore, okay, what's that low self-worth about? Or if I, in this situation or that situation, if instead of going into a low self-worth posture, like feeling down about myself, I felt neutral, or, had compassion towards myself instead, how would that feel, right? And at first, usually the answer that comes up is, that'd be great, right? That feel wonderful. And then if you really continue to hold that attitude of compassion towards yourself, sometimes what happens, let me back that up. Often what happens with a low self-worth schema is, oh wow, something about this is uncomfortable. Something about this doesn't quite land. This is like a mismatch to some expectation that I have deep down about how I am, or how reality works, or what I deserve, and that sort of thing. Okay, so in that case, there's a deeper, you could say, purpose to an underlying symptom of low self-worth that must be explored and known explicitly in conscious awareness. If we're talking about a more surface level symptom, for example, let's say it's frustration or a feeling of helplessness about those low self-worth, about that deeper level of low self-worth, then we can ask ourselves the same question, like, well, if I were free of that sense of frustration about this low self-worth, how would that feel? It'd be, and then the answer is, well, that'd be great, that'd be wonderful. If you were free of that sense of hopelessness, how would that be? Wonderful. Okay. Does anything feel uncomfortable about that? Being free of frustration, free of hopelessness? No, right? Okay, so that's an important distinction to be made, because a lot of times these more top level emotional sufferings aren't really linked to anything, but they are a kind of coherent response to deeper level suffering. Okay, so those are some distinctions we could make between what I believe you're pointing to, which is stored frustration in the body, and the cycle of created frustration created by the mind. Okay. So third item here. My body is clenched and rock solid. It's completely stuck. I feel like there's a huge load of trapped energy that just won't release. It buzzes and rides, and if I sit with it, sometimes it feels like something is shifting, but it never changes. It's only gotten worse. I think that's linked to this next part here, down here. I feel irritable and frustrated almost constantly, and when I get into the body, there's never any shift. So uh, one helpful way to look at this I found is like this. The body itself acts as a registry for the unconscious mind. So what that means is that, when you're experiencing some tension in the body or something like that, we can be present in the body and we can be attentive to those tensions and, knots or places where energy feels stuck and so on and so forth. Okay. And so that in and of itself will not resolve it. And this is where I think a lot of the Enlightenment traditions, the modern ones anyway, the modern, non-duality schools are not are not fully accurate in their construal of what needs to happen in order to resolve these patterns at a base level. You can now, I'll caveat that by saying you can do practices where really you're compassionately attending for long enough and just not getting in the way, and then things start to move because you're not getting in the way at such a deep level, right? That's possible. Often though, what happens is, and this, I believe this is a necessary condition for healing, because really we can only resolve problems that we know that we have, right? We can only resolve a pain when we know what that pain is. So when you feel into the body, again, which is the registry for the unconscious mind, you could say that the internal space of the body is really how we experience the unconscious mind. When you get into the internal space of the body, you can feel into a tension and you can say something like, or ask something like, what's the emotional tone that this tension has? Or what's the emotional tone that feels like it's held in this area of the body? Or what does it feel like my chest, this tightness in my chest would say right now? Or the fact that I feel this tension in my chest, it's as if I'm responding to what? Or it's as if my body is responding to what type of thing? And just notice what you feel, right? This is not analytical. This is all feeling level. And so you tune into what you feel and you kind of, you're doing that as if inquiry. It's as if such and such is happening, right? And so, so basically, that's part of it. It's like you want to get to the emotional truth, the emotional tonality of what is underpinning the symptom of constriction. And once you know what that emotion is or feeling tone that's present in the body, once you've got that, then you can start to feel like, okay, is this related to any past events that you've been through that you can detect? And you don't absolutely have to know that, right? Sometimes we just get vague impressions, and that's okay. We get the general theme of what's going on or what feels like it's going on. And for the purposes of therapeutic work, that's fine. It's okay. You don't necessarily need to remember a number of traumatic events in vivid detail. What you do need to know is like what the kind of the imprint of those events were, as a gestalt or as a thread of similar types of events. So for example, some people who've endured sexual trauma, the worst thing about it for them was not the fact that that their uncle did something to them. It was the fact that maybe their mother didn't listen. Their family members didn't listen to them. And that was the worst thing about it for them, right? So getting to that, the worst thing about it, I know that sounds kind of like a counterintuitive question. Like if you're trying to do therapeutic work with somebody, why would you ask them what the worst of it was? The reason for that is because it gets to this kind of ontological level, a more mental feeling level of the symptom. The fact that my mother didn't listen to me meant that I was all alone, and I felt like this was only happening to me. It's as if I was the only person in the world that this was happening to, right? And so that can be that type of thing, right? That mental feeling level of the symptom, that can be what's holding it together at the root. It's not the energetic level. It's not the somatic level. There's a mental knowing that the whole mind-body system has that you could say it's at the unconscious feeling level, but it's very specific and clear, right? Because just by feeling into this, we can get information like, I felt like it only happened to me. And that, that for a child can mean the universe isn't safe, the universe is out, the universe itself is out to get me. Um, I'm completely alone and stranded in this kind of yeah in this world where where I'm not in shared reality with anybody else, right? And so that's like, if we were to put the feeling level of it into language, that's what it would be. um and so what then happens is that once that childlike knowing, that kind of feeling knowing at the mental level enters into conscious awareness, often once it meets the adult level awareness and resourcing that we have in our ordinary day-to-day awareness, there's a spontaneous kind of integration and resolution. Because, and I'm deriving this in part from a real case study that's from a 2018 article by Bruce Ecker, where he talks about a case study that's similar to this. But basically, there's a juxtaposition between our childhood, or what's really left over from childhood or an earlier phase in life, where we have a way of seeing and viewing and knowing and feeling and experiencing the world. And then that encounters and kind of integrates in the same space of conscious awareness as our present moment adult resourcing and and some total adult experience that we have access to. And then there's a kind of integration. And so if we were to put that integration into words, it would be like, as tragic as it is, these things happen. I'm not alone in this, because other people do experience abuse, and they oftentimes have post-traumatic growth out of it. And it's an unfortunate aspect of human nature. But it does mean that I am not alone. It means that the universe is not against me in specific, or that there's this horrendous thing is something that that I am uniquely the victim to, in a way that puts me out of the shared emotional reality of the rest of humanity, right? So the juxtaposition, the integration, and sort of uh, the you could say the disconfirmation or dissolution of the sense of aloneness happens when one field of knowing encounters another field of knowing. This unconscious, unintegrated field of knowing, a schema, a part, ego state, and what's held there in terms of mental emotional content enters into conscious awareness and the mental emotional content and resourcing of our adult self. And then there's that kind of synthesis that happens, and the old knowing and the cascading effects of not just the old knowing, but the emotional components of that, of isolation and hopelessness and frustration, and the energetic components of that, of tightness in the body, embracing, and an ongoing sense of defense against maybe one's powerlessness against an uncaring or even hostile universe, right? I'm just kind of riffing here. All of that collapses, you can say. There's deep relief in the energetic structures of the body, because all of that is downstream from from that feeling, that mental feeling level of that comes into conscious awareness, and that's then depotentiated. So I hope that makes sense. You could say that the bracing in the body is a response, and sometimes it's a response that is a direct solution to some deeper problem, and or it's a way of preventing awareness of something, because we really can't, and this is something that Judith Blackstone's fond of saying often, is that we really can't suppress an emotion without also constricting the instrument of our emotions, which is our body, right? So so that's just some food for thought there, that the constriction is actually, sometimes it's an indirect response, but sometimes it's the very means by which we are holding a, you know, a difficult emotion out of awareness. Okay, so it's just something to consider. Doing these, as a brief aside here, doing the kind of attunements to fundamental consciousness that Judith talks about, or if you have some skillful means in your own meditation practice to attune to these deeper, deeper states of being that feel intrinsically safe, intrinsically supportive, like the whole universe supports you, feeling unconditional love and all that sort of thing. That is something that can depotentiate this, what we could call the lid problem. It's like, oh, if I take the lid off of this emotion, I'm going to be overwhelmed. Well, if you can feel into that state of being safe enough, that the universe holds you, or that there's some, divine ground of being that is the deepest level of our own being, and that upholds and supports everything that we are. And there's love and a kind of deep supportiveness in that experience. If we can tune into that, then that depotentiates that sense of, oh my God, I'm going to be overwhelmed if I experience this emotion, so I have to hold on really tight, right? It can also depotentiate feelings of isolation, and deep at the more mental level, it can help us feel a sense of warmth and oneness with reality and with human beings that can depotentiate, can further depotentiate different types of isolation, or feeling like the universe might be just this cold, distant place, etc. Okay, so I hope that that's helpful, and I hope that that gives some context to the third thing here. I'd like to feel emotions in some sense of internal movement, but nothing seems to work. I read Judith's book many times, but I just don't understand what I'm supposed to be looking out for. Is this stuckness just supposed to build and build until it finally releases? I'm not sure which of Judith's books you're talking about. But if you're talking about Trauma in the Unbound Body, for example, and where she's talking about the release technique in, I think, chapter 8, she's talking about the realization process release technique. The procedure there is not to let it build and build and build until it finally releases, but rather, okay, that I think I don't want to get into teaching the release technique on this video, but that the essence of it is that I want to just go direct to your question. Is this stuckness just supposed to build and build and build until it finally releases? No, it doesn't have to go that way at all. Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that you could do it is just by sort of following that gentle process, which, I would advise you to do with, someone who's familiar with this. Wouldn't have to be me necessarily, but, to work with somebody who can help facilitate that process. Because look, the reason that I'm saying that, or just inviting that for consideration, is for the fact that when we do this work, there's a reason for which the unconscious is called the unconscious. It's because it contains a lot of things that we are not conscious of. And like, once we become conscious of them, it's like, oh my God, this happened, and it can be something that changes how we see the world, or changes how we see ourselves. These can be, we can have big upheavals of emotion, and I believe it's important to have support for that. I mean, I certainly have practitioners that I've seen in my life, and people that I still go to for guidance for this, that, or the other. And it's important, it's important to just work with somebody that you trust, that you feel good about, and who knows what they're doing. Okay. Okay. So is this stuckness just supposed to build and build and build until it finally releases? No, and you can go the route of, at least my hope is that it doesn't, that doesn't have to be how it is in your situation, or in anybody's situation. I hope that everybody who's in a situation like that can find somebody skillful to work with. If you can't, and you want the DIY method, and you feel okay doing the DIY method, the do-it-yourself method, or, or doing it with a compassionate other, like a friend, or, somebody who can sit with you while you're going through this. You can methodically go through and you feel into, like, for example, tightness in the chest or a tightness in your gut or wherever you feel like the constriction is. And it's like, you can ask, like, if, what does it feel like this constriction or this area of my body is trying to say? It's as if it's trying to say what, or it feels as if it's trying to communicate what. It might be something like, ah, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe we're working ourselves too hard. Or it might be something like, oh, in this relationship, I really feel like I can't stomach such and such, right, anymore. And I always feel like I'm bracing around this person, and I don't. And so a lot of times what'll happen. So here's just one last thing that I'll say about tensions in the body. Usually we get to the emotional level first, and then the deeper stuff comes. That sort of mental feeling level, that's what holds it all together. That usually comes later. The purpose of the constriction, or the purpose of holding ourselves in some sort of self-limiting pattern. So going to that emotional level first, feeling what the body seems to be saying, what the constriction of the body seems to be saying or doing, or trying to protect us from. And if you don't remember a specific thing, if you don't remember any experiences that seem to be linked to that, you just feel into it, because the part of us that is in distress about a given thing, even if the conscious mind doesn't have access to that in the moment, that part of us that we feel in the body that feels like it's in distress over a given thing, but our conscious mind doesn't know what that is, the part that's in distress knows what it is. The part that is in distress about a given thing that's unconscious knows what that thing is with perfect clarity. It's just not a clarity that lives in conscious awareness, right? Which is really interesting to think about. I find this super fascinating, that there is such a thing as an unconscious, and that it's sort of like communicating with this kind of wondrous exotic animal or something. We can be in communication with it, and it has its own unique way of communicating. And if we don't listen to it and tune into it on its own terms, we won't get the message, right? So using that principle of the body being the registry for the unconscious mind, tuning into your feelings, your feeling sensations, but beyond that, starting to integrate it into the conscious mind by asking, well, what does this part feel like it's saying? Or, oh, wow, yeah, my chest, it's almost like there's this cry for help. Feel as if and that's also important. It's as if what is going on, right? And a lot of times that will get you further than trying to remember specific details, unless those specific details naturally come, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's as if I'm defending myself from some sort of attack. Let me feel into what that is. Attack. Oh, what comes to mind is this image of this relationship, your relationship in the past or the present or both, right? And oh, I feel like I'm always wide open to this type of attack. And then it begs the question of, like, well, what is it that's holding up that relationship where you feel like you're always bracing for attack? You have to have a conversation with your partner. Do you have to I don't know, maybe you're not in that type of relationship anymore, and so becoming conscious of seeing everybody as if they are going to treat you like some other relationship did, you can start to let that go, because you realize now where it's coming from, and there's this recognition that you're not in that situation anymore, and and actually you don't, maybe if you are in relationships where people treat you like someone did long ago, and maybe you recognize that you're pursuing that relationship in some unconscious way to, I don't know, get close to a primary caregiver or something like that, and you realize you don't need to do that anymore, right? So I'm kind of giving the short version here. And it's really not possible to cover all the complexity of this. But I hope that gives at least something, some nuance and some context to this, because these are really good questions, and I certainly empathize with your situation. And of course, if you wanted to chat further on this, you can feel free to shoot me an email. So it's michael@realizationconsulting.com. Okay. All right. Take care. And I hope this was useful to everybody else who's watching this as well. Okay. Take care.